Thank you for joining me today on the Moms Who Know podcast, the podcast for moms who know that when they take care of themselves, they can take better care of everyone else. An amazing way to take care of yourself is through a morning routine. When you wake up every morning and do something for you, you're going to see a level of calmness throughout your day. When the kids are going crazy and you're trying to get dinner on the table and everything feels really out of control, you will be in control if you start your morning right. So I have a free download for you that I'm really excited about. It is a done for you morning routine. It can be done in 10 minutes. It's a 7-minute yoga video, a 1-minute meditation, and a page of journaling prompts. So you can just take a couple minutes to journal out your thoughts. This 10-minute morning routine can just be turned on, done, and then you can get on with the rest of your day. So to get your free download, go to momswhoknowpodcast.com/morning and pick that up. I'm super excited for you to have that and let me know what you think and if it's useful for you. Today's guest is Sarah Nitta. I heard her speak at a luncheon we both attended back in May, and she was a contestant on Biggest Loser, and it was so interesting to hear about her journey and all that she went through, and she really goes into that today and some of the emotional things that she went through, gaining and losing a large amount of weight. Sarah teaches us some things in this episode that are relevant to all of us, whether we have struggled with weight or not. And you're going to love this episode with Sarah Nitta. So let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and my guest today is Sarah Nitta. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, I am too. This is a long-awaited call. Sarah and I have been in touch since, I want to say, last April or May, and I heard her speak at a luncheon that I attended, and her story was so interesting, and I just loved listening to her. In fact, the other speakers had gone on, and it was running late, and I kept worrying while you were speaking, Sarah, that they were going to cut you off. And I'm like, no, I want to hear the rest of this. I want to hear her story. So I'm super glad to have you here today to share your story and for everyone to listen and learn from you. So if you don't mind, I'll just do a brief introduction and then I'll hand it over to you and we'll learn a little bit more. But Sarah is a mother of 2 girls, and she was a contestant on Biggest Loser season 11. So that was the one that aired in 2011. I remember distinctly watching her. You were the one I was rooting for. You and your mom were on there together. And I don't always watch. In fact, I don't watch TV very much at all, but we must have had we had an antenna or something back in 2011. We've never really had cable, but for some reason we got that channel and I remember watching that. So again, I'm excited to have you and to hear a little bit more. So to start off, let's just hear a little bit about kind of your background. We're going to be talking a lot about weight loss today and your journey through that. But let's talk a little bit about your personal history and kind of what led you to Biggest Loser.
That sounds great. And if I am, going a wrong direction or rambling too long, you just correct my course. Okay.
Okay. I'll pipe right in.
That sounds great. So, well, I started gaining weight from the time I was probably 6 years old. My mom had struggled with her weight, my entire life. And she just was very unhappy and just going through her own stuff. She's an incredible woman, but just really had a hard time as I was growing up. She has 8 kids. And I remember seeing her, the only time that I would see her be happy or have fun or feel joy was when she was eating. And I think that not only was I, genetically predisposed to obesity, I think I also learned that behavior because I wanted to feel those good feelings. I didn't like how I felt when I was teased at school or by my siblings. And I think I just learned by watching that, to eat to feel those good feelings. And so I started gaining pretty young, and just kind of grew up always heavier than the rest of the kids my age. Um, and as I got older and more aware, I remember in fourth grade was the first time I was teased for my weight. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe other kids notice this. Like, I don't even know if I noticed very much before then. But about fourth grade is when other kids noticed and would tease me for that. And so, as I got older, I watched my mom go on every single diet, and I watched her obsess about weight and talk about it all the time. And I just went the opposite direction, where I just wouldn't talk about it or bring attention to it. I felt like, if I didn't bring attention to it, nobody would notice it. And that's kind of how things went for me. I just hoped that people wouldn't notice. In fact, in around seventh grade, when I was at this brand new school, I ended up, my very first day of school, my very first day in this class, and I made a joke. I don't even know what I said, but I said something, and everyone in the class laughed at what I said, and it was like something switched in my brain, and I realized that like people weren't laughing at my weight, but they were laughing because they thought I said something funny. And I realized then that I could make people not see my weight if my personality could be bigger than my weight, if that makes sense. And I think
Yeah.
that's just kind of how things turned for me. And I just started making sure that my personality was always screaming louder than my weight. And so I became everyone's friend, and I had a wonderful junior high and high school experience. And even though I continued to gain, I just hoped that people really wouldn't notice that. And I went off to college and experienced my first true heartbreak, and my weight just spiraled out of control after that. I just didn't know how to handle those feelings, or and I just always thought that someday I would get over it, that someday I would get a handle on my weight. And I didn't start really like dieting until I moved to Germany. Actually, I moved to Germany just for fun. I was a waitress out there. And that's when I really started to try different diets. I was, not around my family or friends. I felt like maybe I could surprise everyone and come home skinny. That's what kind of when I learned just for myself the pattern of these diets, and yo-yo and up and down, and it just became this obsession of either I was dieting or not, right? I was either eating everything in
Mm-hmm.
sight or I was eating nothing. And I was very all or nothing personality, and just up and down, up and down. I continued in this way of never talking about my weight, though. I ended up serving a mission for my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I served a year and a half as a missionary. And during that time, I had to exercise, which I had never done before. And so as I exercised, and it helped that I hated the food in the area that I was in, so I didn't eat as much, and I lost weight while I was as a missionary, and I came home, smaller, like 40 pounds less than when I had left. And then shortly after that, I was in a severe car accident that I ended up breaking my pelvis in several different places, and had to go through a lot of recovery. And during that time, I was on heavy medications, and I wasn't eating much then. So I just continued to lose weight. And that's when I met my husband, and I just never told him that I had struggled with weight. And not that I was at a healthy weight. I still was probably 50 pounds overweight, but I was not 100 pounds overweight anymore, So,
Right, right.
yeah, I just hoped that, he would never have to see me like that. I led him to believe that I was going to be, once I could walk again, that I could, get back into shape, I just didn't want him to know. But of course he would never have to know, because I was just never going to go back there. Right. Like, that's such a common belief that, we get to a good place and we think, oh, I'm never going back to that habit or past behavior. And anyway, we got married and we started our family, and I got pregnant and I miscarried, and I just spiraled. I just didn't know. I didn't know how to handle those emotions. I didn't know what to do with myself. I became really obsessed with starting a family. I felt like that, we were good. We were really good then. We were really happy. And I felt like that's when we were happy, and that's the only thing that was going to get us back there. And so I became obsessed with getting pregnant again and charting and testing and everything. And while doing that, all my past behaviors with food just started creeping up, like hiding food in my desk at work, eating in isolation so that nobody would know, hiding wrappers like deep down in the garbage, like these behaviors that were not normal behaviors and not healthy behaviors. But I didn't know why I was doing this, at the time I didn't know about food addiction. I didn't know that maybe something was going on deeper than just my lack of will or lack of motivation. I just thought, what is so wrong with me that I'm such a terrible person that I can't stop, that I can't love myself or love my husband enough to get healthy so that we can have children, And that's kind of the mindset I was in, which was just kind of a really sad place to be. And I got really depressed and continued to gain weight. And, but I never talked about my weight with anybody before. I just hoped nobody would notice. And so in our first 2 years of marriage, I gained 90 pounds and never talked about it, never mentioned anything. And I just got so depressed, and my poor husband just walked on eggshells. Like, clearly something's happening, but we couldn't talk about it. Anyway, and then one day I was driving and listening to the radio, and a commercial came on for the Biggest Loser auditions in Salt Lake. And I just felt like maybe that's my answer. Maybe that could fix everything. And I decided to audition for the Biggest Loser. And I went through that whole process and auditioned for the Biggest Loser, and ended up making it on the show. And then the network changed their mind, and before we started filming, and they took me off the show. And it was just such a roller coaster. And then I found out I was pregnant, and that made sense why I wasn't on the show anymore. And that pregnancy ended up being ectopic, and it ruptured, and it was just this awful surgery and crazy time of life. And then Biggest Loser called again and asked me to come audition for the next season, season 11, and which was a partner season. And I went and auditioned with my mom, and we ended up making the show and started on that. So I'm going to pause and you let me know what.
Well, I do have some questions, but I love that that whole background and getting really, the picture of everything that led you there. The big thing that comes up for me is all the emotional things. There were a few things that stood out. So one thing you said, for your mom, happiness, when she was happy, it was related to food. And then you talked about you had a good high school and middle school experience, and you were having this, big personality, and these kind of emotional components are really what stood out to me and what I'd like to know a little bit more about. Okay, to start with, have you ever talked to your mom about this? Would she agree that that was her happiest time, was when she was eating?
Yeah. In fact, as we went on the show together, we definitely just really dove into our background and what got us to that point. And she certainly would agree with that. She was, I think, dealing with depression that she didn't really understand at the time. And, the moments, it's funny because it's like the happy time. But I think it was constant. I think it was even, her way of numbing out. Even when she was yelling at us, there was food in her hand. So it wasn't, when she was eating, she was always happy. But the
It,
times that I remember her being happy, it was when she was making food, and that's certainly like how she showed her love too, Oh, you had a bad day? Come on, let's bake cookies together, or, you know,
right. So it
so
was linked. Yeah, that's so interesting to me. So it would definitely had a link there with emotions and eating and food. Now, I want to talk about this in high school and middle school. You said you had a great experience and lots of friends and lots of fun.
yeah.
What was going on in your mind? Like, were you worried about your weight in your mind, or you were disconnected from it and it wasn't even an issue because you were happy with friends? Or talk to us a little bit about that.
I think that like every time it came up in my mind, I mean, clearly was was different sizes than all my friends, and every time that it would start to bother me, I just mastered pushing it down, I guess, because it was so
Mm,
uncomfortable. And it just became this learned behavior to just when something like that came up to just stuff it back down somehow and not think about it. So it certainly was there. The thoughts would come like, oh, I have a lot of really good guy friends that just love to talk to me about all these girls that, um, like, yeah, I just found a way to push those feelings away. Um, whether that be from like convincing myself that I didn't care or, it just, yeah. Does that answer your question?
yeah, totally. And that actually makes sense too with what you were saying when you had, your a bad breakup or heartache, whatever it was. And then when you had a miscarriage, all those things that then those feelings are so big and so strong that you can't push those down and you needed a way to process those. And so that kind of ties that in for me. So okay,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your experience on the show, both, kind of what you went through. We'd love to hear the recap of what it's like,
Yes.
during and then after the show, and then emotionally too, what it feels like to go through that experience.
Right. It's funny because, I watched the show as I waited in the hotel room for the finals before you get chosen. It's like 2 weeks. And as I spent so much time in this hotel room, I caught up on Biggest Loser seasons. And so I just was so excited for that experience because I saw the transformation at the end, both emotionally and mentally and physically, But then to go through it was like, oh my gosh, this is awful because I can't fast forward or I can't just binge watch more episodes and then be there. Like I had to actually experience it and I had to go through the full 24 hours in a day. And um, it was so hard because of how full of fear I was. I was terrified. I was terrified of exercise. I felt like I wasn't, I was a confident person and, put me in a social situation and I'm okay, but put me in a physical situation and I was so terrified. Um, and so I just felt like, oh, my biggest weakness is being exploited here. And, I started out that process just so full of fear. And it was really, really hard. I really hadn't exercised much in my entire life. And so I was put through physically just these challenges that I could not have wrapped my head around unless I was experiencing it. We had something called the wall wash in the shower. Basically, it's because your arms would be so sore from exercise that you couldn't lift them to wash your hair. So basically, you just would take your shampoo bottle and get it as high as possible, probably, not much higher than your hips, and squeeze it onto the wall and then wash your hair up against the wall because you couldn't
Oh, wow.
because you couldn't lift
Oh,
your arms. I mean, it was just so physically, it was so challenging. But halfway through, I knew like I had learned like, oh my gosh, I can get through these things. That was an invaluable lesson for me, just how capable my body was. And that as awful as something felt, like I would get stronger and it would get easier. So, that was a good experience. Mentally, it was really, really hard. Emotionally, that was the biggest struggle for me. It was so challenging. I wanted to talk to my husband, and I didn't speak to him for 3 months. We have no communication out with the outside world at all. No email, no letters. Like, they're writing us letters, but they're being withheld. So I didn't hear from him for 3 months. I got letters at the 3 month mark. And I think that it just played tricks on my mind. And, I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home every second of the day. I really did. I just really struggled being there. But I think that ended up being a really great thing for me because I didn't go home. I did stick out something that was really, really hard. And that has proven to be a lesson for me that has served me since the show, that when things are really, really tough, I don't have to run away from them. I can stick them through and eventually it will end, so yeah.
Yeah. So then would you say, looking back, was it worth it? I mean, obviously you learned some lessons. Was it the experience? Let me rephrase. Was the experience what you thought it would be, first of all?
The experience.
Did you get out of it what you with Biggest Loser? Did you get out of it what you hoped to get, and you were glad about the results, kind of thing?
That is a great question. It was not at all what I thought it would be. Like, not at all what I thought it would be. Like, the filming process, I mean, it takes 12 hours of filming to make 1 minute of TV time. And so we were filming all the time. And I just didn't know what that experience was going to be like, But just the whole experience altogether, no, there's no way I could have ever, imagined what it would be like. And it was certainly the hardest experience, but I'm so grateful for the things that I learned from it. I feel like it, like I said before, like there are lessons that have come from that experience that have just served me really, really well. And I'm so grateful for, some people had a more positive experience on the show. Some people had a worse experience on the show. And we get what we choose to take from it. Right. Like, it was not the most positive all the time for me. But I learned things that I just could not imagine. Like I said, I was so full of fear, and I had no faith in my body. I had no relationship with my body. I was just terrified of my body getting hurt, especially after having gone through that car accident. And this was only, a couple years later. I was so afraid of pain and hurting, and I just learned what my body's capable of. I feel like this kind of sounds a little bizarre, but my relationship with my body was healed. It was mended, when we were just on very different pages. And, I learned just how capable I was of doing something hard.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. I don't think that sounds weird at all. I love that you healed that relationship with your body. I think that's a relationship sometimes we don't spend enough time on, but it's huge. It's a big deal. We definitely need to spend that time. Okay. So this is so interesting to me. Now, when my husband and I were first married, and actually one time when I was single, we actually worked at a weight loss camp, and people come there, and it's like Biggest Loser, except you're not on TV, right? But it's the same basic idea of kind of a boot camp and living away from home, and all your food's provided. And so some similarities there. But people would come there just like they come to Biggest Loser, thinking, if I do this, all my problems will be solved. They will, of course, not exactly that, right? But I've heard people talk about, oh, if I could just go on Biggest Loser, like just focus on me, just have this time to, be away from everything, then my weight would be under control. What would you say to someone who has that paradigm? Because it's out there. It is out there.
Totally. In fact, I would say, oh, I hear ya. I believed the same thing. And I'm so grateful that I experienced it to now know that that's not a truth for me. And I don't believe that it's a truth for very many. I mean, certainly benefits come from, having only that to focus on, like that would be amazing. But the reality is it doesn't change the way that, how do I say that? I guess for myself, I have discovered that, that I suffer from a food addiction, and that willpower or motivation or being in a secluded place or, taking time for myself, like any of those things individually, that it doesn't change a food addiction, that there has to be something higher and more powerful than me that can help. And I think that, these fitness camps are fantastic. In fact, I worked at one also after the show, and I love what they can offer. And I think that it can be an aid in helping you learn about, some things about yourself. But I don't think that taking out all of the stressors of your life that feel like the cause of your inability to gain control actually will get you to that place. I think, I feel like I have now done it all. I've experienced all of it. My weight has gone up and down since coming home from The Biggest Loser. And I thought that it would be fixed. I truly thought if I could make it on the show, I'm healed, I'm fixed. That's my answer. In fact, I would even admit that I would judge people that, had gained weight after being on Biggest Loser, because I'm like, how could you do that? You've been given the golden ticket. You have won, how could you waste that? And now through my own experience, I see like, oh, that's not reality, and it's not sustainable. And it actually, in my case, didn't fix any of the deeper issues, the struggles that I dealt with in my mind, and the food addiction side of it, and anyway, so I think that I guess holding on to the belief that if you were able to remove some stressors, and just focus on weight loss, that you could do it. I don't agree. I don't think that's the answer. I think that finding what's truly happening in your mind, what is causing these compulsions to eat, is it really because you're just bored, or is there something that is stronger that you genuinely, you can't stop yourself? Those are addiction tendencies. And I think that here now I'm in a addiction recovery program for food addiction, and I have 2 6-year-olds at home, and I work, and I'm the president over an organization in my church that of all of the children that keeps me super, super busy. And I think, wow, I have more stressors than ever before. I have more things going on than ever before. Like, I think with my mindset of, if I could just focus on myself for a while, I could do it. If I continued in that, I would never get there. But, here I am with the right tools and the right help. I'm able to recover and heal from my food addiction with all of these things still, I don't know if this
Yeah,
is
which is
answering or
so
not, but
important. Yes. No, definitely. I was going to ask you a little bit more and you just went right where I wanted to go, which is perfect because I was going to ask, so what does make the difference? And I think you've given us a little bit of that answer. Like, as you've worked through what is going on in your mind and gotten deeper, what would you say to someone who is where you were, before you were on the show and really struggling with their weight and doesn't know if it's food addiction, doesn't know what the issue is for them? What are some things that you've done that have helped you that you would share with others?
oh, that's a great question. And as I now have discovered how strongly I struggle with food addiction, I think that, that's where my mind goes is if you do too, find that out because there is help. And so there are resources out there to help if you struggle with food addiction. It's so similar to alcoholism or a drug addiction, any other drug or any other addiction, whatever the vice may be. When it is, I think, like, for me, I mentioned this before, that I just felt like I was just the worst person in the world. I was such a, I loved myself, but then deep down I was like, but I'm too selfish to change and to do better. And like, what's wrong with me that I've been given every golden ticket? I've been, had all these opportunities. I mean, every program. And now that I've been on the show, like, trainers offer to train me for free or companies send me their product for free, and it's wasted on me because I am so broken that I can't do it. It's so sad to think about the way that I thought, because now, having learned about, what I do struggle with, I realize, like, oh my gosh, I have a disease. There's my brain works differently than maybe a normal brain. And so I'm not a terrible person. I just have been dealt this disease, this challenge in my cards, right? And so for me to understand that actually has been really liberating and freeing for me. And then being able to find help. The program that I do, it's a free program, and it follows. It's just like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's for food addiction, and it's all done through service. And I just feel like, now I finally have this program, these tools that have taught me how to arrest this addiction a day at a time, and I think that's so beyond me. That's, I don't have the willpower. I'm not able to do this on my own. But I have learned that there is one who is my higher power, is able to step in and help. And I've always believed that. I just didn't know how to access it. And this program has taught me how to access it, this recovery. And I think, so for me, of course, talking to other people, I say, hey, go find out. There's resources online to look. If you feel like you struggle with food addiction, there is help out there. If you don't feel like you struggle with food addiction, there's help out there. We live in a time that there are several, like, even free motivation groups and people that are willing to help each other out. We thrive off of each other's success and accountability. I just think it's out there, and healing is possible. And if you've tried it all and you feel like, oh, I'm the broken one that cannot get over this, I'm the broken one that will always be overweight. I was there. I believed that. I started feeling bad for people when they would start a program, because I thought, oh, your heartbreak is coming. If you only knew that you're going to fail. Isn't that sad? I really thought that. Where now I feel like, no, there is hope. There is so much hope for healing from weight issues, and that what comes with the healing of issues with weight is, I mean, all of the belief about yourself. And there's just so much healing that comes aside from physical weight.
Yes. Well, I love that. I think that that's really what I'm taking from this conversation is so much hope. You know, our journeys, our lives can go in so many different directions, and sometimes it can feel hopeless. And yet, as we've listened to you today, I think there's just so much hope. And sometimes our journey is not, linear. It's not just like
Yeah.
what we think it's going to be. Boom, go on Biggest Loser, problem solved. Not
Yes.
necessarily, but look at where it's led you, and really so much more. Like you said, it's so much more than about the physical. It's this journey to uncovering your self-worth and really knowing, who you are and what you have to offer. So I love it. So thank you so much for sharing that with us and for being with us today. I appreciate it so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you everyone for listening to Moms Who Know. Thank you so much for being here today on this episode of the Moms Who Know podcast. Sarah was just so real and honest, and I loved hearing about her experiences and learned a lot from her. As a reminder, you can get your done for you morning routine at momswhoknowpodcast.com/morning. If you loved this episode or any of the episodes here at Moms Who Know podcast, please share. That helps me so much. And I really appreciate all of you who share the show and leave reviews. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.